Hey y'all, welcome back to the Celestial Harvest. Today I want to give you guys 10 things to consider when you go to start your garden. Consideration number one when you begin to garden is to determine what your goal is for your garden. And I think by having an end goal in mind, it makes it easier to decide what types of plants you want to grow. If you're growing flowers for fun because you enjoy seeing your flowers grow, it's going to look like a very different garden and very different considerations than if you're growing your garden for food sustainability. In our case, we're a family of 4, so for us, creating some food sustainability means making sure that the plants that I'm choosing are calorically dense and making sure that they're yielding enough food to sustain 4 people. Consideration number 2 when you go to start your garden is to determine how much space you actually have to devote to your garden. Somebody who has several acres is going to have different challenges than someone who is going to have a very small backyard. For us, gardening out of our backyard means that we need to make use of our vertical space, which is why we've put in some cattle panels for this coming spring planting. And also for me, it's determining what types of plants are going to give a large yield in order to use the least amount of space for the most amount of food. Consideration number 3 when you're planning your garden is to think about the layout of your land. Do you have areas on your property that are prone to flooding because you have a pond or a lake nearby? Are you in an area that gets full sunlight all day long? Or are you completely covered with trees where you need to consider plants that thrive in shade? These considerations are going to make a difference on the plants that are actually going to survive and thrive in your garden. The 4th thing to consider as you begin your garden is to think about the type of soil that you actually have. Are you in an area that has some luscious black soil, or are you like the majority of us with sandy soil that's going to require amendments? One of the easiest things that you can do when you're starting your garden is just taking a soil sample down to your UF extension office, and they will test it for you, and they will tell you what the acidity is like and maybe give you some insights on the things that are missing in your soil. Please know that not everyone tests their soil, and that's totally fine. I have another video on soil that you can check out if you just want some general principles on how to improve your soil. Consideration number 5 as you start your garden is I want you to think about how your soil drains. We don't want a soil that's draining so freely that the nutrients and water are not allowed to get to our plant's root system, and we also don't want a soil that is so wet that it's keeping our roots soaking and they are going to start to rot. So you can do some really simple tests to determine this. If you already know, that's great. Just keep it in mind as you start to consider the things that you need to do to prepare your ground for your plants and what type of plants you're going to grow. Number 6, determine how long you're willing to wait to actually start producing food. And this is important if you're trying to do things a little more organically. So for us, that meant waiting on our compost bin to start. That was the very first thing that I set up in our yard, adding our yard waste and mulch and leaves to it to create some soil. But that's going to take months to break down before we could apply it to our beds. So one of the ways that I started growing right away was to fill our raised beds with quite a bit of mulch and then only putting some bagged soil on the top. And that's where I planted my first season's plants, which predominantly were crops that were going to be nitrogen fixing. So I was able to still grow right away, but that gave me time for my compost to process so that when it was time to switch the beds over, I could add that material to my raised beds, and that are going to be a little bit better fed. The nutrient levels are going to be higher. I'm not worried about buying bags and bags and bags of organic compost. However, that takes time. So you're going to have to determine how much time you're actually willing to wait to plant and grow your plants versus whether or not you're willing to just go purchase the organic compost or organic soil. Number 7, consider the time of year that you're actually planting. I want you to remember that here in Florida, we do have different seasons, and the things that are going to grow well in winter are not the same things that are going to do the best in the heat of the summer. In fact, you may have more trouble growing most things in the summer because of the heat and the pests that you're going to encounter. So make sure that as you're planning out what things you want to grow, that you're taking into account when you're planting them and what time of year it is, what does well during that time of year. You have got some great guides on different times that you should be planting different plants. Number 8, as you begin to plan your garden, make sure you're picking things you actually like to eat. If you don't like Brussels sprouts, then don't plant a whole bed full of them. Make sure that you're actually going to enjoy and use the things that you grow. Number 9, and arguably one of the most important things that you can do when you're planting your garden, is to pick varieties and types of plants that are going to thrive in your area. If you're planting things that don't do well in your zone, you can plan to have an uphill battle. Last but certainly not least, number 10, just start gardening. There is no time like the present to get started. Don't be intimidated by all of the details and minutia. And please reach out to me if there's any way that I can help you on your gardening journey. Push subscribe. I'm putting out new videos each week for y'all. And push like if you're enjoying the content so I can know what things that I can bring to you to help you with your gardening journey. Happy gardening, y'all.